Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The fog that rolled over the narrow sea that morning was thick as milk, soft and endless. The great harbor of King's Landing lay half hidden beneath its folds, its masts like lonely trees in a ghostly forest. Sailors moved quietly on the docks, their voices hushed by the mist. It was said that when the sea grew so silent, old gods from across the waters walked unseen among men. Among the ships that came to anchor that dawn was a Bravosi merchant cog. Small, unremarkable, its sails pale and patched, yet its lone passenger disembarked with a grace that made even the dockhands pause. He was clothed in a traveler's cloak of weather-stained gray, his hood low, his steps soft. The guards at the harbor gate thought him a simple tradesman, but when his eyes flicked toward them, cold, still, and fathomless as a winter pool, they turned away, unsure why their hearts had quickened. The man had no name that could be spoken aloud, though once he had been called Kalor in the tongue of Bravos. He was of the house of black and white, where men and women learned to shed their names as they shed their faces. His purpose was clear, his path certain. He had come to King's Landing to find a traitor. Years ago, in the hidden halls beneath the house of black and white, a brother had broken the sacred vows of the Faceless. He had taken from the temple secrets meant for none but the many-faced god himself, and then vanished into the western world. His trail had long gone cold, until whispers arose from King's Landing, whispers that the traitor yet lived, cloaked in power, whispering into the ears of kings. Kalor's orders had been simple: find the one who betrayed the house and end him. So, on that fog-filled morning, the Faceless man entered the city of the Iron Throne. King's Landing greeted him with its usual mix of noise and stink. The cries of fishmongers tangled with the clang of hammers and the laughter of sellswords already drunk by midday. Kalor moved among them like a shadow that refused to join the light. He bought bread with coins that looked worn and dull, and he spoke little, his voice carrying the faintest Bravosi lilt. By nightfall, he found a room above a cobbler's shop in Flea Bottom, small, dim, and perfectly forgettable. From there, he began to listen. The city was a nest of secrets, but one name surfaced again and again: Varys, the master of whisperers. Some called him the Spider, for his web stretched through every corridor of the Red Keep. He was said to know every rumor before it was spoken, every betrayal before it was done. And the strangest tale of all claimed that Varys had once been a slave in Essos, gelded by a sorcerer, yet had somehow risen to become one of the most powerful men in Westeros. Kalor remembered the name. Long ago, before he became a servant of the many-faced god, he had heard of a child thief from Lys, sold to a troop of mummers, later to a magus who practiced dark arts. The tale had ended in fire and blood, but perhaps not all had been lost in those flames. If the whispers were true, then Varys's rise might not be mortal fortune at all. Perhaps the eunuch's secrets were stolen from the house itself. 3 nights passed before Kalor made his first move. Under the cover of darkness, he crossed the narrow alleys near the Red Keep. He moved silently, as a shadow through deeper shadow, until he reached the black mouth of a tunnel half hidden behind a tangle of ivy. Few knew that the keep sat upon a maze of older passages, tunnels built by Maegor the Cruel, lined with hidden doors and forgotten stairways. Kalor lit no torch. His eyes, long trained to the dark, found their way by touch and memory. He had studied the designs of such tunnels in the archives of Braavos, for the House of Black and White kept knowledge older than any king's reign. He descended until the air grew chill and damp. Somewhere far above, torches burned and nobles whispered, but down here, time itself seemed to sleep. He followed the murmur of water until it led him to a narrow archway barred by rusted iron. Beyond it lay the servants' cellars of the Red Keep. Kaelor pressed his ear to the gate and froze. Two voices whispered beyond. "The hand must never know," said the first, low and careful. "Too many eyes watch him already." "And what of the boy?" replied the second voice, soft, smooth, and curiously musical. "Boys are but tools, my dear friend. Some serve, some fall. The game continues all the same." Kaelor did not need to see the speaker. He knew that voice. He had heard it once, years ago, through a half-open door in a Braavosi tavern, speaking of kings and secrets with the confidence of one who thought himself unseen. It was Varys. The faceless man withdrew into the dark, his breath steady. The trail was real now. He would follow it carefully, for he was no fool. To strike too soon would only reveal his hand. He would learn what Varys truly was before the blade was drawn. When he returned to his room in Flea Bottom, the fog had returned from the sea, drifting between the crooked rooftops like a pale spirit. Kaelor opened the shutter and looked toward the Red Keep, its towers shrouded in moonlight. Somewhere within those walls, the spider spun his webs, and perhaps within those webs lay the face of the man who had once forsaken the many-faced god. Kaelor whispered a prayer to the stranger, the aspect of death who welcomed all paths to the same end. "Soon," he murmured, his voice barely a breath in the night, "you shall have what was promised." Then he closed the window, and the city slept, but its shadows did not. The dawn crept pale and thin over King's Landing, and the fog that had haunted the harbor withdrew at last into the sea. The city stirred with the restlessness of another day. Carts rattling down cobbled streets, fishwives shouting along the docks, the Red Keep glittering faintly above the smoke. Yet beneath that busy surface, shadows lingered still, and one of them moved unseen among the waking crowd. Kaelor had changed his face before dawn. His new guise was that of a modest scribe, thin-bearded, stoop-shouldered, his hair streaked with gray. In this form, he passed through the city unnoticed, blending among servants and tradesmen. The streets around the castle were watched by gold cloaks, but none spared a glance for the weary old scribe who carried parchment rolls beneath his arm. By mid-morning, he reached the lower kitchens of the Red Keep, where servants came and went in a steady stream. He slipped among them easily, nodding as if he belonged. Within moments, he had entered the keep itself, a warren of passageways, cellars, and halls alive with whispers. He had no need to hurry. The faceless men were patient hunters. Their blades were never raised until all masks had been stripped away. From the shadows of a narrow stairway, Kaelor watched the comings and goings of the small council. The doors to the council chamber were flanked by guards, but the hall beyond led into a maze of chambers, where secret messages often changed hands. It was there, as he lingered unseen, that he first saw the spider in the light of day. Varys glided through the hall like a soft wind, silent, smiling, wrapped in robes of lilac and pale blue that shimmered faintly as he moved. His step made no sound, yet the air seemed to bend toward him, as though drawn by some quiet gravity. 2 young servants followed in his wake, carrying sealed letters and small scrolls bound with colored thread. Varys paused near the council doors, speaking softly to a guard, his tone full of warmth and mirth. The man chuckled despite himself, though his eyes darted nervously after Varys had passed. There was something about the eunuch that unsettled even those who liked him best. A sense that his smile saw too much, that his voice hid more than it revealed. Kaelor watched him go, measuring his movements, the ease of his breath, the calm that never faltered. Here, surely, was a man used to living behind masks. He followed at a distance. The trail led him through long corridors of stone and silk, past marble statues and painted ceilings that told of dragon kings and battles long forgotten. In one such corridor hung a tapestry of Valyria before the doom, a city of shining towers wreathed in flame. Beneath it stood Varys, speaking to a thin, hawk-nosed man, whose cloak bore the sigil of a golden rose. "Ah, my dear Lord Mace," Varys purred, "you always bring the warmth of Highgarden wherever you go. Even these old stones seem to smile in your presence." The Lord blustered happily, puffed by the compliment. "Well, one must do one's part, eh? The capital needs a bit of cheer amidst all these grim-faced northerners." "Indeed," Varys replied with a faint smile, "and cheer is a rarer coin than gold these days." Kaelor's eyes narrowed. That gentle voice, calm, soothing, unthreatening, concealed something colder. Each word was weighed like a merchant's coin before it left his lips. No wonder kings trusted him and lords feared him. As Varys and the Lord parted ways, Kaelor slipped closer. For an instant their eyes met. The eunuch's gaze rested on him briefly, polite, untroubled, then drifted away as though Kaelor were nothing more than a servant. Yet in that heartbeat, Kaelor felt the faintest flicker of recognition. Had Varys seen through the borrowed face? He turned away quickly, heart steady but wary. The hunter, he knew, was not always the one holding the knife. That night, Kaelor returned to his room in Flea Bottom, where a candle flickered beside a bowl of cold broth. He unbound his false beard, washed the dye from his hands, and studied his reflection in the cracked mirror. The face that looked back was his own again. Pale eyes, lean features, expressionless as water. Yet a question gnawed at him, one he had not felt in many years. Could Varys truly be the one he sought? The House of Black and White did not often err. Their records were older than any living man's memory, their secrets gathered from every corner of the world. But Varys was a strange creature, neither lord nor priest, neither warrior nor servant. How could such a man, gelded and cast aside, rise to such power unless he had learned the hidden arts of the Faceless? Kaelor closed his eyes, recalling the voice of the kindly man who had given him his charge before he left Braavos. Seek not the face he wears, but the truth beneath. The one you hunt has forgotten death, and for that, he must be reminded. 2 nights later, Kaelor moved again. He followed Varys' servants through the shadowed streets that wound behind the castle. One of them carried messages sealed in purple wax, the spider's color. When the servant slipped into a tavern by the river, Kaelor followed, taking a seat in the corner where the light did not reach. The tavern smelled of smoke and spilled ale. A bard sang softly by the fire, a tune of lost kings and broken swords. Kaelor watched the servant hand a letter to a man cloaked in dark green, then leave without a word. When the man turned, Kaelor saw his face, an assassin from Lys, marked by a small tattoo below his left eye. The faceless man smiled faintly. The spider, it seemed, wove more than webs of words. When the Lyseni rose to leave, Kaelor followed him into the fog-damp alley beyond the tavern. The man had no time to scream. A hand struck his throat. A dagger slid beneath his ribs. As he fell, Kalor caught him and whispered softly, "The many-faced god thanks you." From the dead man's coat, he took the letter, breaking the seal with careful fingers. The parchment inside bore no words, only a single mark, the shape of a coin with two faces. Kalor's breath caught. He knew that mark. It was the sigil of the House of Black and White. The traitor had been here, recently, and Varys was sending messages that only a faceless man would understand. By the time dawn broke again, Kalor had made his choice. The spider would no longer be merely watched. He would be tested. He spent the day in silence, preparing, grinding herbs into dust, sharpening his narrow blade, and mixing a draft that would steal breath without pain. As night fell, he donned once more the face of a nameless servant and slipped into the underways of the Red Keep. The tunnels were alive with echoes, dripping water, distant footsteps, the scurrying of rats' fat on royal scraps. He moved like a whisper between stones, following the faint smell of spice and parchment, Varys's scent. It led him to a small chamber lined with scrolls and maps, where candles burned low beside an open chest of letters. Varys stood there alone, reading by the trembling light. Kalor stepped forward, silent, certain, but before he could strike, the eunuch spoke without turning. "You have come far, Bravosi." Kalor froze. His blade hung poised, the air thick between them. Varys turned then, his expression calm, almost kind. "Tell me, do the priests of the many-faced god still whisper of me in their dark halls?" Kalor said nothing. The dagger glimmered faintly in his hand. Varys smiled, sad, knowing. "Ah, I see they do. Then perhaps you should know the truth before you kill me." And with that, the spider reached into his sleeve and drew forth something small, a coin of dull gray iron, marked with two faces. Kalor's breath stilled, the same coin he carried himself. The silence in that chamber stretched long as a shadow. Two men stood there, one nameless, one known to all, bound by secrets older than the Iron Throne itself. And though no word passed between them for many heartbeats, both knew that the hunt had changed. The hunter and the hunted had begun to trade places. The candles trembled in their iron holders, throwing long shadows against the stone walls of the chamber. Kalor's hand, though steady as carved marble, felt the pulse of something ancient stirring in the silence between them. The iron coin gleamed faintly in Varys's fingers, dull, worn, but unmistakable. It bore the sigil of the House of Black and White, a face divided by shadow, one side smiling, the other weeping. "How came you by that?" Kalor asked at last, his voice low as the sea beneath a frozen sky. Varys regarded the coin as though it were a memory made metal. "Long ago, in another life," he said softly, "I found it among the ashes of a dying city. Braavos is full of forgotten things, you know. Faces, names, promises. I once thought myself one of them." He placed the coin upon the table between them, as if offering it to some unseen judge. "You came seeking a thief, did you not? A man who stole from the gods of death themselves. Tell me, my silent friend, do you truly know whose face you wear tonight?" Kalor's eyes narrowed, but he did not lower his blade. "I know my purpose." "Purpose," murmured Varys, his smile small and wistful, a heavy word for one who serves the god of nothingness. The eunuch's calm was maddening. He did not flinch before death. Rather, he seemed to welcome its nearness, like a scholar greeting an old companion. Kalor took a step closer. "You speak of the god, yet you were never sworn to him. The coin is not yours." "Perhaps not," Varys said. "Yet it was given to me by the one you seek." The words fell like stones into still water. Kaelor's hand tightened on the hilt. The traitor lives? Varys inclined his head slightly. He did once. But what is life to one who wears many faces? When I knew him, he had no name left to give, only a debt. He gestured toward a scroll upon the table, its seal unbroken. That letter, he said, was meant for Braavos. It was to tell them the debt was paid. Kaelor did not move to take it. You lie. Do I? Varys asked softly. Tell me then, Faceless One, if your house knows all things, why send you here chasing ghosts? The chamber grew colder. A gust of air slipped through the cracks, making the candle flames dance like frightened souls. Kaelor studied the man before him. There was no fear in Varys, no trembling, no plea for mercy, only that serene, unreadable calm. Speak plainly, Kaelor said at last. What debt was owed? Varys turned away from him, his hands folded before his robes. Years ago, when I was a boy in Myr, I was cut by a sorcerer who sought to speak with powers beyond men. He burned what made me a man and cast it into the fire. I should have died, but I did not. I crawled into the alleys of the East and lived as a beggar, a thief, a creature without a future. One night, in Braavos, I met a man with no face, who offered me death, and I, too proud to beg for mercy, refused him. He looked back at Kaelor, eyes gleaming in the half-light. So he offered me another gift instead, silence. He taught me how to listen, to vanish, to live in the spaces between men's words. He said I would serve the many-faced God not by killing, but by knowing. For in the end, knowledge is the truest death. It strips away lies, leaving only what is. The eunuch paused. But the man who taught me these things broke his vows. He fled the temple, fearing the punishment of his brothers. When the kindly men came seeking him, he was gone. And I, poor fool, was left holding the coin he had carried. Kaelor felt the faintest tremor of unease, like wind through an old crypt. You speak of him as though he were a teacher. Varys nodded once. He was, a man of many faces, the last of which he burned before me. Then where is he now? In every whisper I have ever heard, Varys said, and in every death I could not prevent. The faceless man lowered his blade, not because he believed the eunuch, but because doubt, cold and thin as a knife, had begun to creep through the certainties that had guided him across the sea. He reached for the sealed scroll. Breaking the wax, he unrolled the parchment. It held no words, only the same twin-faced sigil, and beneath it, drawn in ink dark as dried blood, a single phrase in the Braavosi tongue. The debt continues until all masks fall. Kaelor raised his eyes to Varys. What does this mean? Perhaps that the many-faced God is not done with either of us, Varys murmured. Or perhaps that the one you seek is closer than you think. He stepped back into the shadows, his expression unreadable. You may kill me if you wish. Many have tried. But before you do, ask yourself, why has your God not shown you his face in my death? Kaelor did not strike. Instead, he turned from the chamber, his thoughts a storm. He wandered the tunnels of the Red Keep like a man half dreaming. The words echoed through his mind, mingling with the whispers of the city above. Until all masks fall. If Varys spoke truth, then the traitor might still live, perhaps even within the house itself. Could it be that the faceless men, who prided themselves upon knowing death in all its forms, had been deceived? At last, he emerged into the cold night air of the city's underways. The moon hung pale above the harbor, casting a sheen upon the black water. The mist had returned, curling like breath through the streets. Kaelor walked until the Red Keep lay far behind him. He found himself before the Sept of Baelor, where candles flickered beneath the statues of the Seven. He paused before the stranger's likeness, the faceless one, cloaked in shadow. "Show me the truth," he whispered. "If he lies, let his tongue burn. If he speaks truth, let me see the face of the one who betrayed you." But the stranger gave no sign. Only the candle flames flickered lower, and a chill passed through the air, as though something unseen had heard. Before dawn, Kaelor returned to his room. There, upon the table, lay another coin, identical to his own, and beside it a note written in Varys's delicate hand. "The faceless are not the only ones who serve shadows. Seek the black cell beneath the keep. There, you will find the rest." Kaelor crushed the note, his jaw set. By sunrise, he had donned a new face, that of a mute jailer in the dungeons of the Red Keep. He descended into the black depths where light dared not follow, passing through stone corridors that stank of rot and rusted iron. In the lowest cell, half buried in darkness, he found a body chained to the wall. It had no face, only a mask of burned flesh where eyes and mouth had once been, and around its neck hung a thin chain bearing a coin with two faces. Kaelor's breath stilled. The traitor's debt had indeed been paid, but not by Varys. Something larger moved behind this web of secrets, something that reached from the vaults of Braavos to the heart of the Iron Throne itself. Kaelor knelt beside the corpse and whispered, "The many-faced god receives you at last." Yet even as he spoke, the dead man's lips, or what remained of them, seemed to curve in a faint, knowing smile. And from somewhere above, echoing through the stone, came the soft, unmistakable sound of Varys's laughter, distant, hollow, and filled with something like pity. The echo of that laughter followed Kaelor long after he had left the dungeon. It was faint, distant, yet threaded with an unease that burrowed beneath the calm discipline of the faceless. He walked through the dim corridors of the Red Keep with the weight of unseen eyes pressing against his back. Each torch flickered like a whispering tongue. Each shadow seemed to shift when he turned away. The burned corpse's grin lingered in his mind, that small, mocking curve of what was left of a mouth, a mask melted to the bone. Whoever the man had been, his death had not been a quiet one, and around his neck, the iron coin had gleamed like a taunt from the gods themselves. Kaelor had killed in temples, on ships, in the palaces of kings. He had seen all manner of death, swift, slow, merciful, cruel. Yet the manner of this one felt different. It was not the work of punishment or vengeance, but of erasure. Someone had wished this man's identity to vanish entirely, as if to unmake him from the memory of the world. He returned to the upper halls by way of the servants' stair, emerging into the cool pre-dawn gloom. The castle above was stirring. Roosters called from the city beyond the walls. Kaelor, now clad again as a quiet scribe, moved through the waking corridors unnoticed. Varys was gone from his chambers, yet the air still carried his scent, that faint trace of spice and parchment. Upon the desk lay scattered scrolls and half-sealed messages, none revealing anything outright. But among them he found a curious thing, a map of Braavos, old and delicate, its ink faded by time. Circles marked the aisles of the Titan's shadow and the bridge leading to the House of Black and White. And beside it, a note in Varys's elegant hand. The god of many faces hides even from his own. Kaelor's brow furrowed. Was it mockery or confession? He folded the note into his sleeve and left the chamber, making his way through the keep. Outside, the first light of day broke through the mist, touching the bay with streaks of pale gold. The city looked almost peaceful then, its ugliness softened by morning. Yet beneath that stillness, Kaler felt the pulse of something gathering, a quiet storm of secrets that could drown empires. He went to the docks that evening, drawn by an instinct he could not name. The Braavosi merchant ship that had brought him to Westeros still lingered there, preparing for another voyage. He stood upon the pier, watching gulls circle above the masts, and saw an old sailor he recognized, a man who had once served as a deckhand in the port of Braavos. The sailor's eyes widened at the sight of him. "You've a long shadow, stranger," he said. "I thought you'd sailed back east with the tide." "Not yet," Kaelor replied, his voice the flat calm of a still sea. "Tell me, did any other ship from Braavos arrive after mine?" The sailor spat into the water. "Aye, 3 days past. A black galley, no flags, no cargo, docked in silence, left in the night. No one saw her crew. A black ship without flags, the mark of the House of Black and White when it chose to travel unnoticed." Kaelor's jaw tightened. If the temple had sent others, it meant the matter reached deeper than even he had guessed. He pressed a coin into the sailor's hand and turned away, moving along the wharf until the city swallowed him again. That night, he dreamt of Braavos, of the House of Black and White rising from still water, its doors carved of ebony and bone. He saw the kindly man's face, kind and cruel at once, watching him from the threshold. "All men must serve," the voice said, echoing through the dark, "even those who forget who they are." Then the face shifted, and in its place came another, smooth, pale, and smiling, the face of Varys. Kaelor woke with a start. The candle had burned to its base. A faint sound drifted through the window, the tolling of bells from the harbor. He rose, donned his cloak, and went out. The Red Keep's lower gates were guarded that night by half-drowsy soldiers who scarcely noticed the quiet scribe who slipped past them. Kaelor descended once more into the hidden tunnels, his steps soundless, his hand upon the dagger that never failed him. This time, he did not seek Varys. He sought answers. In the chamber where they had met before, the candles had been replaced. The coin still lay upon the table, untouched. But where the map of Braavos had been, there was now a different scroll, one bearing the seal of the hand of the king. Kaelor broke the seal. Inside was a record of prisoners executed within the last moon. Among them, one name stood out: Tragar of Lys, described as a spy, executed by order of the Master of Whisperers. He remembered the Lysini he had slain by the river tavern, carrying the spider's message. Yet this report said the man had been captured and killed days later. 2 deaths, 1 man, or 1 mask. He was being led in circles. A sound stirred behind him, a whisper of silk upon stone. He turned and found Varys standing there once more, candle in hand, his face calm as moonlight. "I see you've been reading my letters," the eunuch said gently. "Most find them dull." "Why play this game?" Kaelor demanded. "You meddle in shadows you cannot command." "Cannot command?" Varys smiled faintly. "My dear assassin, I was born among shadows. I know their language well." Kaelor took a step forward, his blade glinting faintly. "Tell me the truth, Spider. What are you?" Varys regarded him for a long moment, then set the candle upon the table. "I am what the world needed me to become," he said softly. "A whisper given flesh. The sorcerer who made me thought he was ending my life. Instead, he gave me another. I have worn faces, not of skin, but of words. The mask of the servant, the friend, the fool. In these masks, I have survived." "You speak as a faceless man," Kaelor said. Perhaps the Faceless are not what you believe, Varys replied. Perhaps the many-faced god is not worshipped only in your temple. The words struck like a blade turned inward. What do you mean? Kaelor asked. Varys stepped closer, lowering his voice. Tell me, Kaelor, did your masters ever speak of the ones who left before Braavos was built? The old faces? They were the first servants of the god, wanderers who carried his will across the lands long before the temple rose from the sea. Not all returned. Some forgot their vows and found new gods, of fire, of stone, of shadow, and some learned to serve in other ways. Kaelor felt a chill creep through him. You speak as if you knew them. I do, said Varys, for I was raised by one. The silence that followed was deep enough to swallow the world. Outside, thunder rumbled across the bay. Rain began to fall, soft and cold, tracing paths down the window glass. Kaelor's dagger trembled slightly in his grasp. The ground beneath all his faith seemed to shift. Could it be true? Could the House of Black and White be but one branch of something older? Something that had spread its roots into every corner of the world? Varys looked at him not with triumph, but with a strange sadness. You came to kill me, and you still may. But if you do, the truth will die with me. Your masters will continue to serve in ignorance, never knowing that the god they name is not alone. Kaelor's voice was barely a whisper. Why tell me this? Because, said Varys, the game has begun, and I have need of a player who remembers the cost of masks. He drew from his sleeve a folded piece of parchment and handed it to Kaelor. In this city there is a boy, one who hides in the kitchens of the Red Keep. Find him before others do. He bears a mark behind his ear, the sign of the old faces. Protect him, and you will find your answers. Kaelor hesitated, but took the parchment. When he looked up again, Varys was gone. Only the faint scent of spice and candle smoke lingered in the air. He unfolded the note. Inside was drawn the mark of the two-faced coin, and beneath it, a single word written in the old Braavosi tongue. Return. Kaelor turned toward the window. The rain had ceased. The city shimmered under the thin moonlight. Far across the narrow sea lay Braavos, and the House of Black and White, waiting for answers of its own. For the first time in many years, the Faceless man felt uncertainty, and within it, the stir of something dangerously close to hope. He whispered to the silent god, "Then the masks shall fall." And in the night, he vanished once more. The storm that had swept across the Blackwater Bay lingered into dawn, draping the city in shrouds of mist. The streets gleamed wet beneath a pale sky, and from every gutter rose the smell of rain and rot. Within that veil of mourning, Kaelor walked unseen. The parchment burned like a secret against his chest, its single word echoing in his mind. Return. He had not slept since Varys vanished from the candlelit chamber. His thoughts circled the same shadowed path, the boy in the kitchens, the mark of the old faces, and the whisper that the god of death was not one but many. Such things defied the order he had served all his life. Yet every step he had taken since setting foot in Westeros now seemed to lead him toward this one truth, that the spider's web stretched beyond kings and thrones, reaching back into the forgotten roots of his own faith. The city stirred awake around him, its noise muffled by the damp. Traders shouted in the fish market, bells clanged from the septs, and the gulls screamed over the docks. Kaelor moved among them like a ghost, the hood of his cloak drawn low. He crossed the great square beneath the Red Keep's eastern wall and slipped through a postern gate used by kitchen servants, bringing in the morning supplies. No one questioned a tired-faced man carrying a sack of grain. The castle kitchens were vast, vaulted chambers thick with smoke and the clatter of knives, where cooks barked orders like generals in battle. Kaelor's eyes scanned the press of workers, bakers dusted in flour, maids stoking fires, boys darting between tables with baskets of onions and herbs. Every face was a mask of sweat and exhaustion. He waited, watched. Hours passed before he saw him, the boy. He was small and dark-haired, perhaps 10 or 11 years of age, his tunic 2 sizes too large. He moved quietly for one so young, his eyes always wary, as if listening for a sound others could not hear. Once, when another child jostled him, Kaelor saw him turn his head just so, revealing a faint mark behind his ear, 2 shallow lines forming the shape of a tear, the sign of the old faces. Kaelor's pulse steadied. He had found what Varys wanted him to find. Now came the harder question: why? The boy vanished into a side corridor, carrying a pail of water. Kaelor followed at a distance, his steps light, his breath slow. The corridor led to the scullery, where steam gathered thick around the low hearths. The boy set down his pail, then turned suddenly, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Why are you following me?" he asked. His voice was not fearful, it was knowing. Kaelor froze. Few in this city could read a hunter's tread. "You are quick for your years," he said quietly. "I've been taught to listen," the boy replied. "You don't walk like a guard or a cook or a thief. You walk like death." The faceless man regarded him closely. "Who taught you that?" "The bald man," the boy said. "He said one day a stranger would come, and I should speak if I wished to live." So Varys had prepared the meeting. Kaelor lowered his hood, revealing his pale eyes. "Do you know what that mark means?" The boy nodded. "It means I belong to no one, that I have no name unless the god gives me one." Kaelor studied him. The lad's composure was unnatural. His calm was the calm of someone who had seen too much. "And what name did the god give you?" The boy hesitated. "He said I was called Echo, because I remember the voices of the dead." The words chilled the air between them. Before Kaelor could answer, a bell rang somewhere deeper in the keep. The kitchens erupted in motion. Servants hurried to and fro, calling orders, fetching platters. Echo slipped among them, vanishing like mist. Kaelor followed him through a narrow door that led to the outer yard, then up a flight of servant stairs spiraling toward the upper towers. The boy moved with purpose. Kaelor kept pace, unseen. When Echo at last stopped, it was before a locked iron door that led to the castle's old rookery. The child knelt, drew a slender wire from his sleeve, and began to pick the lock with startling skill. "Where did you learn that?" Kaelor asked. Echo glanced back. "The bald man said knowledge is the truest blade. He taught me to open every door." The lock clicked. The boy pushed the door inward. The rookery beyond was silent. Empty cages hung from beams, their iron bars rusted. Feathers and dust swirled in the draft. A single raven sat upon a perch, preening its wings. When it saw them, it croaked once and hopped closer, as if expecting a message. On the table lay an unopened letter sealed in wax, the seal of the hand of the king. Kaelor broke it carefully. Inside was a short note written in Varys's flowing hand. "Every secret is a door. Behind this one lies the first. Beneath the words, an address. The black cells, vault of the third gate." Kaelor's jaw hardened. The black cells, where the worst prisoners of the realm were kept, those whose names were meant to be forgotten. He looked at the boy. "Did he tell you what is there?" Echo shook his head. "Only that if you came, I was to follow you." "Then stay close," Kaelor said. "The shadows below are hungrier than those above." They descended together through winding stairways and damp corridors, the boy keeping to Kaelor's side without sound. The deeper they went, the colder the air grew, until their breath misted like ghosts. The guards at the dungeon entrance were half asleep. Kaelor passed them a flask of wine laced with dreamgrass. Within moments, their heads drooped, their snores filling the silence. They slipped past into the dark. The black cells were carved of stone older than the castle itself. The walls glistened with moisture, and the air smelled of mold and despair. Their footsteps echoed softly as they reached the third gate, a heavy iron door bound by chains. Kaelor pressed his palm against the lock. It was sealed not with iron, but with an ancient sigil, a twin-faced coin carved into the metal, the mark of the many-faced god. "How could this be here?" he murmured. Echo tilted his head. "Maybe your god has more keys than you thought." Kaelor drew a small dagger and pricked his finger. Blood welled dark and quick. He smeared it over the symbol. The metal shuddered, and with a groan of hinges the gate opened. Beyond lay a narrow chamber lit by a single lantern. In its center stood a stone altar. Upon it rested an iron mask, the face of a man, half in laughter, half in sorrow. Kaelor stepped closer. The mask was old, its edges eaten by rust, yet the craft was unmistakable. This was no mere ornament. It was a face, one of the sacred relics of the House of Black and White, carried by those who had once been high among the Faceless. He reached out, then paused. Carved beneath the mask was a line of script in the Bravosi tongue. The first face was never lost. It was given. Behind him, the boy spoke softly. "He said the gods wear men as masks, not the other way around." Kaelor turned sharply. "Who told you that?" "The bald man." Varys again, always Varys. The faceless man lifted the mask from the altar. It was heavy, cold, humming faintly in his hands. A strange dizziness crept through him, as though he stood at the edge of memory. For an instant, he saw flashes, Bravos under moonlight, a faceless brother kneeling before the kindly man, and the same iron mask being lowered into a chest long sealed. He stumbled back, the vision fading. Echo watched him with eyes too old for his years. "What did you see?" the boy asked. Kaelor's voice was barely a breath. The one who first betrayed the house. He did not steal the face. He was the face. A sudden noise broke the silence, the sound of boots upon stone. Torches flared in the corridor beyond. "Guards," Kaelor whispered. Echo darted behind the altar. Kaelor pressed the mask beneath his cloak, just as the iron door swung wide. 3 gold cloaks stormed in, their captain raising a lantern. "You there!" he barked. "By order of the king, this level's forbidden. Drop your weapons." Kaelor moved like shadow. Before the captain could draw breath, his dagger flashed once, twice. The guards fell soundlessly, their bodies folding into the dark. The lantern rolled across the floor, spilling oil that hissed upon the cold stone. Echo stared at the bodies, his face unreadable. "You kill as easily as breathing." "Death is a gift," Kaelor said, "and gifts are given, not taken." The boy nodded solemnly. They left the chamber behind, closing the gate with care. Above them, thunder growled again, and the storm returned, pounding the city with rain as if the heavens sought to cleanse its sins. When they reached the surface once more, Kaelor looked toward the bay. Somewhere beyond the mist, ships waited for the tide. He turned to the boy. "We leave tonight," he said. "For Bravos. Will the bald man be there?" Kaelor's gaze drifted toward the Red Keep's towers, glowing faintly through the rain. "If he is what I think he is," he murmured, Then he never truly left. They vanished into the storm, leaving only the whisper of the sea and the faint tolling of bells to mark their passing. And far above, in the high tower where secrets gathered like cobwebs, Varys stood at the window, watching the dark water, his pale hands folded in thought, his eyes unreadable. "The mask returns home," he whispered, "and so the game begins anew." The sea was a mirror of slate and silver beneath a wounded moon. The small Braavosi ship that carried Kaelor and the boy moved soundlessly through the waves, its single sail black against the night. Wind whispered through the rigging, a low, mournful song that seemed older than the world itself. Kaelor stood upon the prow, the salt air biting his face. Behind him, Echo slept, curled beneath a rough wool blanket, his breathing steady. The boy had not spoken much since they fled King's Landing. He ate when told, slept when told, and watched the sea as if it whispered secrets only he could hear. Kaelor watched too, though his thoughts were darker. The iron mask he had taken from the black cells lay wrapped in oilcloth in his cabin below, yet even from here he could feel its presence. Heavy, cold, alive in some unfathomable way. He had spent his life believing the masks of the House of Black and White were sacred tools, vessels through which the gods' mercy flowed. But now he was no longer certain what mercy meant, or whose hands had truly shaped the first of them. The words carved upon the altar haunted him still. The first face was never lost. It was given. To whom had it been given, and for what purpose? As dawn broke, the fog lifted, revealing the Titan of Braavos rising from the sea, vast, implacable, its bronze face turned toward the sun. The ship passed beneath its shadow, the sound of its deep iron roar rolling over the waves like thunder. Echo stirred at the noise, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Are we home?" he asked softly. Kaelor looked upon the city beyond the Titan, the canals gleaming like molten glass, the domes and bridges gilded by morning light. "For some," he said, "this is home. For others, it is where all homes end." They docked at the western quay as gulls circled and the bells of the Sea Lord's palace rang in the distance. No one paid them heed. Braavos was accustomed to strangers stepping from ships bearing secrets. Kaelor led the boy through narrow streets lined with silent statues, across bridges of pale stone that arched over still green water. The city smelled of salt and smoke and rain. By midday, they reached the Isle of the Gods, where temples rose in a solemn ring around the central lagoon. Kaelor stopped before the familiar doors of ebony and bone, the House of Black and White. The boy hesitated. "It feels cold." "It is the cold of truth," Kaelor said. "All warmth burns away here." He pushed open the great doors, and they entered the Hall of Faces. Darkness swallowed them. The air was cool and still, and from the far side of the chamber came the faint sound of dripping water. Candles burned low, their flames reflected in the hundreds of faces mounted upon the walls, pale, preserved, eternal. Some wept, some smiled. Some looked as if they might whisper if one stood too near. The kindly man awaited them at the far end, his hood drawn, his voice calm as ever. "You have returned, Kaelor," he said, "but not alone." Kaelor bowed his head. "This child bears the mark of the old faces. Varys sent him." The kindly man tilted his head. "Ah, the spider's web reaches far indeed. What does he seek this time? Redemption or ruin?" Kaelor's hand went to the cloth-wrapped bundle at his side. "I found this beneath the red keep. It bears the mark of our house." He unwrapped the mask and set it upon the stone floor. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to breathe. The candle flames flickered, and a whisper rippled through the air, like a sigh passing over a grave. The kindly man knelt and touched the mask's cold surface. His fingers trembled. "So it is true," he murmured. "The first face returns." Kaelor frowned. "You knew of it?" "Once," the old man said. "Long before your birth, when the world was young and death had many tongues. The first face was not carved by mortal hands. It was given by the god to the one who first learned his name. A man who walked between worlds, neither dead nor living. He took the name Vareno, which in the old tongue means the Whisperer." Kaelor felt the name strike him like a chill wind. "Varys," he breathed. The kindly man's hood turned slightly, as though he too tasted the echo. Names change. Faces change. The essence remains. If this Varys is indeed descended from that first servant, then he is bound by the oldest of our vows. Then he betrayed you," Kaelor said. "He used your gift for power. Or perhaps he obeyed," the kindly man said quietly. "The god's will is not always the will of his priests." Echo stepped closer to the mask, eyes wide. "It calls to me," he whispered, "like a song I almost remember." The kindly man regarded him for a long moment. "You feel it because it knows you. The mark behind your ear, that was placed upon you as a child, was it not?" The boy nodded. "Then you are of his blood," the priest said softly. "The Whisperer's line." Kaelor's heart clenched. "That cannot be. The Faceless take no wives, bear no heirs." "Not by flesh," said the kindly man, "but by face. When the first face was given, it carried within it a fragment of its maker's will. Those who bore it passed that will onward, not through blood, but through memory, through the taking of another's visage. Each time the mask was worn, a piece of the wearer remained within it. Over ages, it has become more than an artifact. It is a vessel of many souls." Kaelor stared at the mask, the hollow eyes gleaming faintly in the candlelight. "And now it calls to him." "Yes," said the kindly man. "To the boy who carries what remains of its first bearer, to the echo of the Whisperer." The air grew heavy. A soft hum filled the chamber, rising from the mask itself. Kaelor stepped back as shadows pooled around it, twisting into shapes that flickered and bled into one another. Faces upon faces, shifting faster than sight could follow. The boy gasped. "What's happening?" The kindly man's voice was strained. "It awakens. The mask remembers." Kaelor reached for the boy, but the air around the mask thickened, pulsing like a heartbeat. From the center of the darkness, a voice emerged, distant, layered, neither man nor woman. "Who wears the face of the god's forgotten child?" Echo trembled, his small hands clenching. "It's speaking to me." Kaelor drew him back, but the shadows coiled upward, wrapping around the boy like smoke. The mask rose from the floor, turning slowly in the air. "The debt remains," the voice intoned. "The face was given. It must be returned." "Returned where?" Kaelor demanded. The kindly man's eyes gleamed beneath his hood. "To the source," he whispered, "to the place where death first took form." The mask descended, its cold surface brushing the boy's skin. Echo did not flinch. When it touched him, light burst from the hollow eyes, pale and blinding. Kaelor shielded his face as a rush of wind filled the chamber, extinguishing every candle. When the light faded, the boy stood motionless. The mask was gone. Kaelor reached out. "Echo?" The boy lifted his head slowly. His eyes were not the same. They shimmered like quicksilver, bottomless and ancient. His voice, when it came, was not his own. "The god waits, Kaelor. The many-faced see through one face now. The web is woven. and the center lies not in Braavos, nor in King's Landing, but beyond both, in the land where faces are forged and forgotten. Then the light dimmed, and the boy collapsed. Kaelor caught him before he struck the ground. He looked to the kindly man, who gazed down with the calm of a priest who had already seen the end of the tale. "You must go where he leads you," the old man said, "to the edge of the world, where the river of death meets the sea of night. There the truth waits, of Varys, of the Whisperer, of us all." Kaelor looked at the child in his arms. Echo's breathing was shallow, but steady. "And if the truth is not meant to be known?" The kindly man smiled faintly. "Then you will learn whether ignorance, too, wears a face." Outside, the bells of Braavos tolled again, low and solemn. Kaelor stepped into the cold evening, the boy in his arms, and the mist rose from the canals like pale fingers reaching toward the sky. The sound of the sea blended with the faintest murmur of voices, as though the city itself were whispering his name. He looked once toward the east, where the horizon glowed faintly red, the direction of King's Landing, and the man who had set these events in motion. Then he began to walk. For in the shadows between gods and men, a story older than thrones was waking, and its first breath carried the scent of death. Night came heavy upon Braavos, thick with mist and the murmur of unseen tides. The house of black and white stood silent behind Kaelor, its doors closed once more. He walked along the canal road with the boy cradled in his arms, the city's lanterns gleaming faintly upon the water like fallen stars. Echo stirred at last as the fog rolled around them, his eyes fluttering open, those same silver eyes that no longer belonged wholly to a child. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice weak, distant, as though spoken through another. Kaelor's gaze never left the dark water. "To the docks. We must find a ship bound east." "The kindly man said the edge of the world," Echo murmured. "Do you know where that lies?" Kaelor's expression was grim. "I know of only one place men call the edge of the world, the Shadowlands beyond Ashai. If truth hides anywhere, it hides there." The boy fell silent, staring into the fog. Beneath the low moan of the wind, Kaelor thought he heard faint whispers curling through the air. 100 voices, all speaking his name. When he looked down, Echo's lips were still. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once. He quickened his pace. By the time they reached the harbor, the tide was full. The ships rocked softly in their moorings, their sails dark against the stars. Kaelor found a Braavosi trader bound for Korth and offered a pouch of silver to the captain, a broad man with wary eyes. The captain hesitated only once, glancing at the boy's strange gaze before nodding. "We sail on the morning tide," he said. "Best you keep below deck. There are men who fear omens." Kaelor bowed his thanks and carried Echo aboard. The deck creaked beneath their feet, and the scent of pitch and salt filled the air. In the small cabin given to them, he laid the boy upon a narrow cot and closed the door. For a time, all was still save for the faint rhythm of waves. Then Echo spoke again, his voice barely more than breath. "He's watching us." Kaelor looked up sharply. "Who?" "The bald man. He stands on the dock, but he's not alone." Kaelor moved to the small porthole and peered out into the fog-drenched quay. And there, just visible through the shifting mist, stood Varys. He was cloaked in pale gray, his hands folded, his face turned toward the ship. And beside him, faint as a reflection upon dark water, stood another figure, tall, shrouded, its features lost within a hood of black. When the wind shifted, both shapes dissolved into the mist. Kaelor returned to the boy's side. "Sleep now," he said softly. "Whatever follows us will have to cross the sea." But his own sleep did not come. The voyage to Korth took 22 days. The first week passed in uneasy calm. Echo spoke little, though at times his eyes seemed to follow things unseen. Once, when Kaelor woke in the night, he found the boy standing at the prow, gazing into the horizon. The sea glowed faintly where his fingers brushed the railing, as if stirred by ghostlight. "What do you see?" Kaelor asked. "Faces," Echo whispered. "In the deep. They're waiting." Kaelor looked, but saw only black water and moonlight. "Dreams," he said. "Nothing more." Yet his voice lacked conviction. The second week brought storms. Waves crashed over the deck, tearing sails and snapping ropes. Lightning split the sky, revealing monstrous shapes in the clouds, vast and shifting, like the faces upon the walls of the house. The crew whispered that death itself hunted their ship. The captain spoke no such words aloud, but he crossed himself whenever Kaelor passed. Through it all, Echo remained calm. Once, amid the storm's height, he lifted his head and whispered something in the old Bravosi tongue. The sea stilled. The thunder ceased. The storm broke apart as if cut by an invisible blade. Kaelor watched in silence. He had served death all his life, but never had he seen it obey a child. When at last they reached Korth, the heat was suffocating. Perfumed winds rolled in from the desert, thick with the scent of spice and dust. They left the ship at dusk, slipping through the city of colored towers and peacock banners. Kaelor avoided the merchant princes and their curious eyes. To them, a faceless man was merely another curiosity. Dangerous, perhaps, but worth a coin's wager. They stayed that night in a quiet inn near the Jade Gates. The boy slept deeply, but Kaelor did not. He sat at the window, the iron mask unwrapped before him. In the moonlight it gleamed faintly, its two halves, joy and sorrow, forever divided. He traced its edge with one finger, feeling the hum beneath the metal like a heartbeat. He remembered the kindly man's words, "To the source, the place where death first took form." He knew now that this mask was no relic. It was alive, bound to the god's oldest will, and it had chosen a new vessel. He turned toward the sleeping boy. "What are you becoming?" he whispered. But there was no answer, only the soft rhythm of breath. By morning, the boy was gone. Kaelor found the window unlatched, footprints in the sand below. He followed them through the winding alleys until they ended at the edge of the harbor. There, upon the stone pier, stood Varys once more, and beside him, Echo. The eunuch's hand rested gently on the child's shoulder, his expression calm, almost tender. "You've come far," Varys said as Kaelor approached. "Farther than most who bear your many faces." Kaelor's voice was low. "Why bring him here?" "Because the sea ends here," Varys replied. "Beyond this point lies the road no man returns from. The boy must walk it, or the world will drown in its own shadows." Kaelor's dagger flashed into his hand. "You speak riddles as always. Tell me the truth." Varys' smile was faint, sorrowful. "The truth is older than your god, Kaelor. The truth is that death was not born of mercy, but of hunger. The first face was given to feed that hunger, a mask to contain the endless void. It was meant to bind it, to keep it sleeping beneath the world. But every soul that dons the mask awakens it a little more." He looked down at Echo, whose silver eyes glimmered with reflected moonlight. "The boy is the key, as I once was. He is the echo of what the god sought to silence." Kaelor's grip on the blade tightened. "And you? What part do you play, Spider?" "I am the memory of the face before faces," Varys said quietly. "The whisper that taught your order its first words." I was never one of you, Kalor. You were born of me." The wind stirred, scattering sand across the stones. The boy looked between them, his voice soft and strange. "It's calling me. I can hear the sea, and something beneath it." Varys knelt, meeting the boy's gaze. "Go where it leads you, little one. What sleeps must be seen before it can sleep again." Kalor stepped forward. "If he goes, he dies." Varys turned to him, eyes full of that terrible calm. "All things die, even gods." He stood, and the wind rose sharply, the sea surging against the pier. The water darkened, boiling with unseen depth. From far below came a sound, a heartbeat vast and slow, shaking the stones beneath their feet. Echo's eyes shone brighter. "Kalor," the boy said, his voice now layered with many others, "you must choose. Kill me, and the hunger sleeps. Let me go, and the world remembers." The faceless man stood frozen, torn between duty and something deeper, a flicker of feeling he had long thought dead. The dagger in his hand trembled. Then, with a breath that was neither prayer nor curse, he sheathed the blade. "Go then," he said. "Let the god claim his due." Echo stepped to the edge of the pier. The sea rose to meet him, not as water, but as shadow, curling upward like a living cloak. For an instant, his small form was haloed in silver light. Then the shadow closed around him and was gone. The waters stilled. The heartbeat ceased. Varys turned away from the edge. "He will return," he said softly. "In another face, another age. That is the god's way." Kalor looked at the sea, the place where the boy had vanished. "And what of you?" The eunuch's eyes glimmered faintly in the dawn. "My part is done. I am but a whisper fading in the wind." When Kalor looked again, he stood alone. That night, as the stars burned cold above the desert, Kalor took the iron mask from his satchel and cast it into the sea. It sank without a sound, yet even as it vanished beneath the waves, he thought he heard faint laughter, soft, knowing, endless. He turned his face eastward, toward the unseen lands where night never ended, and began to walk. For the first time in all his years, he walked not as death's servant, but as a man seeking what lay beyond it. And somewhere in the deep, something old and hungry stirred, smiling with both faces, waiting to wake once more. The desert stretched before Kalor like a sea of glass, rippling beneath the molten dawn. For many days, he had walked eastward, leaving behind the green shores of Korth, the murmuring harbors, and all the faces of men. The sun bled across the horizon, and the air shimmered with heat. Yet he did not tire, for something deeper than mortal will carried him onward. The faint echo of the boy's last words, still whispering in his mind, "Kill me, and the hunger sleeps. Let me go, and the world remembers." He no longer knew which he had done. Each night he camped beneath the stars, where the sky seemed larger and stranger than any he had known. The constellations here were unfamiliar, a serpent swallowing its tail, a face split in two, a spider woven of stars. Sometimes, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, he saw shapes moving within the dunes, gliding beneath the sand as though it were water. They left no tracks, no sound, only a sense of being watched by something vast and patient. On the 9th night, a wind arose from the east, dry, hollow, carrying a smell of ash and stone. He woke to find the horizon glowing faintly red. There, far off, rose the mountains of the Shadowlands, black and jagged against the sky. Between them lay Ashai, the city of shadows, where sorcery was said to drink the light of the sun. The kindly man's words returned to him like a tolling bell. To the edge of the world, where the river of death meets the sea of night. So he went on, The road that led to Ashai was no road at all, but a cracked vein of stone winding through scorched valleys. Kalor walked it alone. No birds sang, no wind stirred. Even the air seemed afraid to breathe. He saw bones half buried in the dust, not only of men, but of creatures he could not name, their skulls elongated, their ribs like cages meant for giants. At last, as dusk fell, the black walls of Ashai loomed before him, high and ancient, glimmering faintly as if the stone itself drank what little light remained. No torches burned upon its gates, no guards stood watch. The gates stood open. He entered. Within those walls, silence reigned. The streets were wide and empty, paved with slabs of oily black stone that reflected the starlight like a mirror. Houses stood dark, their windows hollow. Yet Kalor felt eyes upon him, unseen, innumerable, watching from every shadow. He came to a marketplace where no market traded, only statues of men and beasts, each carved in mid-motion as if frozen by some curse. Their expressions were twisted in terror. He brushed a hand across one. The stone was warm. "Living once," he murmured. A voice answered from behind him. "Everything lives for a time." Kalor turned sharply. A woman stood there, cloaked in silver gray, her face veiled in thin gauze. Beneath it, her eyes gleamed like embers. "You have come far, Bravosi," she said. "Few cross the deserts and reach this gate." "I seek the source," Kalor said, "the place where death was born." She tilted her head. "Then you seek the river Ash, where it flows beneath the city. It feeds the black stones and quenches the thirst of no man. But to find it, you must give something in return." Kalor's voice was steady. "Name your price." The woman's gaze flicked to his belt. "Your dagger. Its steel remembers too much. Cast it aside, or it will turn against you." Without hesitation, Kalor drew the blade and threw it into the dust. The woman inclined her head, then turned and began to walk. "Follow, if you dare." They passed through narrow alleys that wound downward like veins through a corpse. The air grew colder, the darkness thicker. At length they reached a stone stair that spiraled into the earth. From below came a dull roar, deep and endless, the sound of flowing water. When they reached the bottom, Kalor beheld the river Ash. It was unlike any river he had known, broad and slow, its waters black as night, glimmering faintly with streaks of crimson. The current moved as though alive, pulsing with a heartbeat not its own. "This is the blood of the world," said the woman. "It runs from the heart of the mountains to the sea that lies beyond all maps. Drink, and you may find the truth you seek." Kalor knelt by the shore. The air smelled of iron and old rain. He cupped his hands and tasted the water. It was cold as death, and in that moment the world fell away. He stood not in darkness, but in endless light, blinding and white. Voices murmured around him, thousands, millions, the voices of all he had ever killed, of all who had ever worn a face not their own. The light shimmered, and from it stepped the boy, Echo, his silver eyes calm and infinite. "You came," the boy said. Kalor fell to his knees. "Where are we?" "In the memory of the first death," the child replied. "Before gods and men, before time itself. The Whisperer made this place when he sought to bind the hunger. But every chain rusts, every lock weakens." The light rippled, and Kalor saw shapes moving within it. Vast shadows twisting like serpents. "The hunger wakes," Echo said. "It knows the faces of all who have served it, and it knows yours." Kalor's voice trembled for the first time. "Tell me what I must do." "You cannot kill it," said the boy. "Only trade places with it." The words struck like a blade. "You mean You must become what you feared, Echo said. Take the mask, wear it, and let it devour you. Only then will it sleep again. Kaelor closed his eyes. And if I refuse? The boy's voice softened. Then the faces will fall, one by one, until the world is left bare. When Kaelor opened his eyes, he was back upon the shore. The woman stood beside him, watching. From the folds of her cloak, she drew something wrapped in dark cloth. You dropped this along the way, she said, handing it to him. He unwrapped it and saw the iron mask once more, gleaming faintly in the gloom. Kaelor stared at it for a long time. How did it? The woman smiled beneath her veil. It never left you. It never can. He looked into the hollow eyes of the mask and saw not metal but reflection, his own face, pale and weary. Slowly, he raised it to his skin. The iron was cold, but it fit perfectly. When he spoke, his voice echoed as though many spoke with him. Tell me, who are you? The woman lowered her veil. Beneath it was no face at all, only darkness. I am the one you will become, she said. The river roared louder, and the world began to unravel. When the dawn came again, the city of Ashai stood silent, but its gates were closed. Travelers who passed in later years said they saw a figure upon its highest tower, cloaked in gray, wearing a mask half in sorrow, half in joy. They called him the Whisperer Reborn. And from that day, those who prayed to the many-faced god found their dreams haunted by a voice, soft, distant, and endless, whispering in a tongue no man could name. Kaelor had become the keeper of the hunger, the guardian of the god he once served. And far away, in King's Landing, Varys awoke in his bed to the faint sound of that same whisper, curling through the shadows like a promise fulfilled. He smiled, softly, knowingly, as dawn light touched the walls. Even death, he murmured, wears a face. The whisper spread like a breath across the world. In the years that followed Kaelor's vanishing into the shadowed lands, strange tidings were told in every corner of the known world. Mariners swore that on moonless nights the sea turned black as ink, and that beneath its surface one could glimpse faces rising from the depths, men and women long dead, their eyes open, their mouths moving soundlessly in prayer. In Braavos, the priests of the House of Black and White found their candles flickering with no wind, their vaults trembling as if something vast and unseen moved beneath their foundations. The kindly man, old and near blind, would pause often before the wall of faces, whispering names only he could recall. He did it. He would murmur to the silence. He took the burden. May the god grant him peace, if peace still exists. But the god was silent. Far to the west, across the narrow sea, another man listened. Varys, master of whisperers, the spider, sat within his secret chamber beneath the red keep, where the walls sweated with damp and the air smelled of candle smoke and ink. His little birds had long ceased their chatter. The tunnels seemed emptier now, as if the city itself held its breath. On the table before him lay a single coin, the twin-faced sigil of Braavos, dull, cold, and old as sin. He turned it over in his fingers, studying it as though it were a living thing. The faintest sound, like a sigh, escaped from the metal. Varys closed his eyes. He's done it, he whispered to the dark. The hunger sleeps again, for now. From somewhere deeper in the tunnels came an echo, soft and far away, a voice like his own, yet not his own, answering in the stillness. For now. He smiled faintly. So it begins anew. That same night, a tempest swept across the narrow sea. Waves rose as high as the masts of ships, lightning split the heavens, and in the chaos, a lone vessel from Braavos was seen drifting without sails or crew. It carried no name upon its hull, only a mark scorched into the wood, a mask, half laughing, half weeping. The sailors who found it said the deck was dry though the rain fell in torrents, and that at the helm stood a figure cloaked in gray, motionless, gazing east. When they hailed it, it did not answer. When they drew near, the ship was empty. The tales reached every port, and with them came whispers of a new faith spreading from the east, one that spoke not of the many-faced God, but of the one who remembers, the keeper of all lives and deaths. In their prayers they used no temples, no idols, only silence, and always, before the prayer ended, came a single word: Kalor. In Ashai, beneath skies forever veiled in twilight, the river Ash still flowed black and slow. Yet something stirred beneath its surface now, not hunger, but memory. Those who dared drink of its waters found themselves haunted by dreams of other lives. A girl in Bravos wearing the face of a beggar, a soldier dying beneath dragon fire, a queen whispering to her unborn child. When they woke, their tears tasted of salt, and their eyes glimmered faintly with silver. The priests of shadow called it a curse, the wise men called it knowledge, and the silent called it mercy. Far below, in the caverns where the river met the sea, the figure who had once been Kalor stood watch. His body was not as it had been, the flesh pale and smooth as stone, his eyes dark and endless. Around him drifted faces, faint as mist, rising and falling with the slow rhythm of the current. He knew each one, the kings he had slain, the beggars he had comforted, the boy who had once been his charge. Echo's face was among them, serene, luminous, free of pain. "You are safe," Kalor whispered to the waters. "All are safe, for a while." But even as he spoke, he felt the old pull stirring in the dark, that vast and patient hunger, sleeping still, yet dreaming. It would wake again one day. All chains break, all guardians falter. He could only hold it, not destroy it. Still, he would hold it for as long as breath and will endured. That was the duty of the Faceless, to keep the balance between death and life, silence and song. Seasons passed, empires rose and crumbled. Dragons flew once more above the world, their shadows sweeping over kingdoms reborn. Yet in the quiet corners, in the spaces between wars, the spider's web still glistened, invisible but unbroken. Letters crossed the narrow sea in secret, written in ink no light could reveal. The messages carried no words, only patterns of two faces, joy and sorrow. When the final letter reached Bravos, the kindly man was long dead. A girl with a pale face and gray eyes, the last of his students, broke the seal and read the invisible lines. When she held the parchment to the candle, the hidden script appeared. "The world remembers. The God is watching. Keep the door open." She folded the letter, placed it among the others, and extinguished the flame. In the darkness, she thought she heard the sea sighing against the foundations of the temple, whispering in a voice not unlike Kalor's, "All faces return." One night, years later, Varys walked the tunnels one final time. The city above had changed. Kings had died, dragons had come and gone, and the Red Keep itself seemed weary of secrets. He carried no scrolls, no keys, no poisons, only the old coin, worn smooth from years of turning. When he reached the deepest chamber, where water dripped from the ceiling and rats whispered like ghosts, he knelt beside the dark pool at its heart. He set the coin upon the surface. It did not sink. "I have played my part," he said softly. "Now take what remains." A ripple passed across the pool. The reflection that looked back was not his own, but another's, Kaelor's, wearing the mask. Varys felt the faintest touch upon his mind, gentle as sleep. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, the spider felt peace. When dawn came, the pool was still. The coin was gone. Only a faint smile lingered upon the eunuch's lips, as though he had heard the end of a story, long unfinished. Far to the east, the figure in the gray cloak stirred. He felt the thread snap, a whisper fading into silence. He bowed his head. "Rest, old friend," Kaelor said. "The web is whole again." He turned toward the sea of shadows that stretched beyond the cavern's mouth. A wind rose from its depths, carrying with it the scent of salt and rain and memory. The faces in the water shimmered, countless and ageless, each one glowing faintly with its own small light. The hunger slept beneath them, bound once more by the weight of all those lives. Kaelor stood watch until the dawn, though no dawn ever truly reached that place. His heart, if heart he still had, beat with the rhythm of the world. In the stillness, he whispered the final vow of his order, older than the house of black and white itself. All men must die, but not all must be forgotten. The river answered with a murmur, soft and eternal. And somewhere above, in a city of stone and gold, a child was born beneath the first storm of spring. A child with eyes the color of quicksilver. The midwife swore that when it took its first breath, she heard a whisper like the sea inside the room. The child smiled, though no one could say why. So the circle began again. The mask, the faces, the hunger, and the whisper, all part of one story, unending, eternal. And in the deep where Kaelor kept his vigil, the god of many faces smiled, content for now, while the world turned beneath him, dreaming of all that was yet to come. The world turned, and with it, centuries passed. Kingdoms flared and withered like sparks in the dark, and the sea that once divided men's empires drew them together again in war and trade and prophecy. Yet in the east, where the river ash bled into the sea of night, no wind stirred, and the mists hung unmoving. Beneath that stillness, Kaelor kept his silent vigil. He did not age as men do. Time flowed around him, a slow and patient river. His body had grown pale as marble, his veins faintly luminous beneath the skin. His eyes, once gray, were now mirrors of shadow, and though he breathed, the air carried no warmth through him. He had become both alive and dead, a vessel of remembrance, bound to the god who had forgotten sleep. For a long while, the world above sent him no word, yet Kaelor felt its tremors in his dreams. Dragons reborn, kings falling, new gods rising where old ones crumbled. Each death was a note in the endless song of creation, and every face that vanished was gathered into him, unwilling or not. He bore them all. But even memory grows heavy when it has no end. One endless night, for there were no true days in that place, Kaelor felt a stirring beneath the water. The river's current faltered, the faces within it twisting as though caught by an unseen hand. From the depths came a voice, soft as the shifting of silt. "The web phrase." Kaelor raised his head. "Who speaks?" The water shimmered. From its mirror rose a shape, neither man nor shadow, but something between. Its form rippled like smoke in wind. "I am what remains," the voice said. The whisper without the mouth, the echo without the stone. Kaelor's breath caught. "Varys." The shape inclined its head. "What once was Varys, yes. What you left behind when you took my burden. The world stirs again, Kaelor. The hunger dreams anew." Kaelor stepped closer to the water's edge. "It cannot. I have bound it." "Nothing binds forever," said the echo of Varys. The masks crack, the faces fade, And memory too decays. Even gods erode beneath the tide of time. The whisper deepened, threading through the sound of the river. There is a new shadow moving in the west, a man born of fire, claiming dominion over death itself. His priests speak of light, but their god's flame feeds on the same hunger you chained. It calls your name, though it knows not what it calls for. Kalor felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. He had heard rumors of this god once. Ruller, they called it, the Lord of Light, the enemy of darkness. Yet what if the two were not enemies at all? What if they were two faces of the same hunger, each pretending to war against the other to keep men praying? If the flame rises, Kalor said, then I must rise as well. The voice in the river flickered, dimming. You will not rise unchanged. The longer you hold the faces, the less you are yourself. Kalor looked down at his pale hands, at the faint shimmer beneath the skin. 1,000 lives, restless and whispering. There is no self left to lose, he said quietly. And with that, he turned from the river and began to climb. Ashai's upper halls were long abandoned. He passed through corridors of black stone slick with moisture, past carvings of winged shapes that no mortal mason had ever crafted. When he reached the gates, the sky beyond was dark but not starless, streaked with faint red, as though the horizon itself burned. He crossed the silent plains east of the city until he reached the cliffs overlooking the Sea of Night. There, upon a crumbling ledge, stood a figure waiting. She was cloaked in crimson silk that glimmered with its own inner light. Her eyes, when she turned them upon him, burned like coals. I have walked long to find you, she said. They call me Melisandre of Ashai. Kalor regarded her without expression. You seek death, then? I seek the end of death, she answered. The world is changing. The great other stirs beneath the dark, a god of cold and sleep. My lord, the Lord of Light, bids me find the keeper of shadows, that his flame might consume the night forever. And I have found him. Kalor's voice was quiet, almost weary. You mistake me for an enemy. I am not death, nor its master. I am the memory of both. She smiled, and in that smile burned madness and devotion in equal measure. All memory can be burned away. Even shadow leaves ashes. She raised her hands. Fire flared between them, not the orange of mortal flame, but white and fierce, bright enough to turn night to day. The air trembled with heat. Kalor did not flinch. The fire rushed toward him like a wave, and stopped. The flame froze midair, curling upon itself, its edges turning black. The light dimmed, and from within the fire came the sound of voices, whispering, pleading, weeping. Melisandre's eyes widened. What have you done? She gasped. I gave them a place to rest, Kalor said. Even your god's fire is only another face of death. He reached out and touched the burning air. The flame folded into his palm, shrinking until it became a small, dark ember. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Melisandre fell to her knees. You cannot end it. The light will rise again. I do not seek to end it, Kalor replied, only to keep the balance. He turned away, the ember still glowing in his hand. Tell your lord that death remembers his name. That night, Kalor built a cairn of stones upon the cliffs overlooking the sea. He placed the ember at its heart, burying it beneath the black rocks. As he worked, the wind whispered through the cracks, carrying words in tongues long forgotten. When the last stone was laid, he looked to the horizon. There, far beyond the sea, he saw a faint glimmer, not of dawn, but of something older, deeper. The faces within him stirred, restless, murmuring in unison. Another age begins, he said. and so the mask must change once more. He reached into his cloak and withdrew the iron mask he had worn for centuries. It was cracked now, its sorrowful side split through the cheek, the smiling side dulled by time. He pressed his thumbs against it, and it shattered into dust. The wind caught the fragments, scattering them across the sea. For the first time since he had taken the god's burden, Kalor felt the air upon his uncovered face. It was cold, but real. He closed his eyes. I have been shadow and whisper. Let me be a man again. When the first traders from Karth sailed past the cliffs of Ashai that season, they saw smoke rising from the black shore. A lone figure walked there, cloaked in gray, his face hidden beneath a hood. The sailors called out, but he did not answer. They said his steps left no mark in the sand. Yet where he passed, the dead waters of the bay turned clear for a heartbeat, reflecting the stars above. One of the crew swore that as the ship drifted by, he heard the man speak, not to them, but to the wind. All men must die, the voice said, low and distant, but not all must be forgotten. And then he was gone, vanishing into the mist that never lifted. In the west, a new priest of the Red Temple would soon rise, preaching that the fire and the shadow were one. In the east, the House of Black and White would find its vault of faces strangely quiet, as if the god himself had gone walking among men once more. And far below, beneath the river and the sea, the hunger turned in its sleep, dreaming of a man who wore no mask and yet bore every face the world had ever known. The cycle held, the world endured, and somewhere, between life and death, Kalor walked on, faceless, nameless, eternal. The years folded into one another like waves upon the shore, and the man who had been Kalor passed unseen through the changing ages. Kingdoms fell, thrones melted, names rose and vanished from the tongues of men. Still he walked, through ruin and rebirth alike, a gray wanderer whose shadow stretched across continents. To some, he was a ghost, to others, a saint. In truth, he was neither, for he belonged no longer to the living nor the dead. He traveled west once more, leaving behind the black rivers of the Shadowlands. His steps carried him through deserts of red dust, across the burned bones of empires long forgotten. Sometimes he passed through villages where the people bowed to him without knowing why. Sometimes he walked among the dead, their bones whispering beneath his feet. The wind called him by many names, but in his heart only silence remained. The hunger slept beneath the sea, but even in its dreams it reached for him. He could feel it in the earth, a slow, endless pulse beneath every mountain and plain. When men killed one another for thrones, when priests burned heretics in the name of their gods, when kings razed cities only to drown them in blood, he felt the echo of it all. Each death fed the thing that waited below. He was the wall between it and the waking world, the last and perhaps the first. Yet a wall cannot stand forever. In the 15th year of his wandering, Kalor came upon a ruined keep by the banks of a narrow river. Its towers had fallen, its gates hung open, and ivy crawled across the shattered stones. Once, long ago, this had been a castle of men. Now it was only a grave. But as he approached, he heard a voice within the ruin, soft, low and weary, singing a tune he half remembered from another life. He stepped through the archway. Within the great hall, lit by a single candle, sat an old woman cloaked in tattered gray. Her hair was white as frost, her face lined like the pages of an ancient book. Before her burned a small fire, its flames the color of moonlight. "You took your time," she said without turning. Kalor paused. "Who are you?" Names are for those who can still forget, she replied. You know me, as I know you. Her eyes met his then, pale and clear as glass. In them he saw himself reflected, not as he was, but as he had been. The face of the boy he had once been in Bravos, before the House of Black and White, had stripped him of name and fear. You wear my past, he said softly. And you wear my future, she answered. I am what you left behind, Kalor, the face you abandoned when you took the god's burden. She rose slowly, her movements deliberate, graceful despite her age. The balance falters again, she said. Do you feel it? Yes, he whispered. The hunger stirs. Then the end draws near. The cycle closes. Kalor stepped closer. Tell me what must be done. The old woman smiled sadly. You already know. All walls must fall so the world can breathe again. He stared into the pale fire. If I fall, the hunger wakes. And if you do not, she said, the world withers beneath your shadow. You keep death imprisoned, and in doing so, you imprison life itself. Release one, and the other will follow. Outside, the wind rose, howling through the broken stones. The candle flame bent low, nearly dying. Kalor closed his eyes and felt the truth of her words tear through him. The god he served had never wanted peace. It wanted balance. The hunger, the light, the shadow, all were faces of the same endless turning. He had tried to chain it, but in doing so, he had frozen the world in its place. The old woman stepped closer and placed a trembling hand against his chest. Her touch was warm, the first warmth he had felt in centuries. Let go, she whispered. You are not the keeper. You are the key. Kalor opened his eyes. And you? I am the door. She smiled then, not with sorrow, but with something like joy, and before he could speak again, she stepped into the pale fire. The flames rose, engulfing her, but no scream came, only a sound like the sigh of wind over water. When the fire died, nothing remained of her but a single ember, white and still. Kalor fell to his knees. The ember pulsed once, twice, then sank into the stone, vanishing into the earth. A tremor shuddered through the ground, deep and distant. The river outside stilled. The air grew heavy. Then came the whisper, not from within him, but from everywhere at once. The key turns. The horizon darkened, though no storm gathered. The light itself dimmed. From the farthest edges of the sky, shadows rose like smoke. They twisted and coiled, forming faces that looked upon the world and remembered what hunger felt like. Kalor stood amid the ruin, his hands trembling. He could feel the god awakening, not the many-faced, not the stranger, not the lord of light or death, but the first and final thing that had ever been. Its voice rolled through his mind, vast and cold. You held me once. Will you hold me again? He bowed his head. No, I will not chain you, and I will not serve you. I will be you. He spread his arms. The darkness poured toward him, filling the hall like a rising tide. It crashed into him with the force of 1,000 dying suns. For a heartbeat, he was torn apart, every life, every face, every whisper flooding back through him. Then the pain vanished, and all was still. When dawn broke, the ruin was empty. The river flowed again, clean and bright, carrying the ash of old stones downstream. In Bravos, the priests of the House of Black and White woke to find every candle in the temple extinguished, yet none feared. They felt a calm they could not name, as if the god had exhaled at last. Across the seas, fires burned lower, wars stilled, and for a brief and fragile age, the world knew peace. Not the peace of conquest or faith, but of silence, the hush that follows a long weeping. In the legends that followed, some said the god of death had been reborn as a man, walking barefoot along the rivers of the east. Others said he had dissolved into the air itself, that every breath men took was touched by his mercy. But among those who truly knew, among the faceless few who kept their vows in the shadowed halls, a different tale endured. They said the many-faced god had no face at all, only memory. The memory of a man who once tried to save the world from its own hunger, and who, in doing so, became its heart. And sometimes, when the wind blew from the sea, the acolytes would hear a whisper beneath the waves, "All men must die, all faces must fade, but love, once given, is never lost." Far beneath the earth, in the hollow where the river ash began, a single figure stood upon the water. Cloaked in gray, his face hidden, he gazed upon the black current as it flowed into the void beyond the world. The hunger lay quiet beneath it, sleeping without dreams. Kalor, or what remained of him, raised his hand, and the water shimmered, filled with the faces of all who had ever lived. He smiled. "I remember," he said, and the river answered, carrying his voice into eternity. The ages that followed were clothed in silence, a silence so deep that even the gods seemed to hold their breath. The seas calmed, the tempests ceased, and men, forgetting the terror of shadows, began again to build. They raised their cities upon the bones of old empires, their temples upon the ruins of forgotten faiths. And though they prayed to many names, to the Mother, the Warrior, the Lord of Light, one name passed quietly from the tongues of men: Kalor. Yet the sea remembered, and the wind remembered, and sometimes when both met upon a lonely shore, a whisper rose between them like a sigh. I remember. In the dark beneath the world, where no sun had ever shone, the river ash wound on. It moved without haste or end, gliding over rock and bone, carrying within its depths the dreams of all that had ever lived. Upon its surface walked the shadow of a man, gray-cloaked, silent. He left no ripples in his wake, no footprints upon the water. He had become the stillness between heartbeats, the pause between dying and birth. He had become what all faces sought when they fell away. But even stillness cannot last forever. It began as a tremor, faint, almost gentle. Kalor felt it in the current, a shiver running through the river's ancient veins. He turned his gaze eastward, toward the mouth where the ash met the sea of night. For the first time in an age, the water was no longer smooth. It churned, restless, as if something vast had begun to stir beneath it. A voice reached him then, not from the water, but from the air itself. It was neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. It was as old as creation, and as new as the cry of a child. "You broke the chain," it said. "You ended the circle, yet all circles must return." Kalor raised his head, his expression calm. "I freed the world from its hunger. The balance holds." The voice laughed, not cruelly, but like thunder laughing at rain. "You did not end the hunger. You became it. You are the balance, and so long as you walk, it turns." Kalor's hands tightened at his sides. The water beneath him reflected not his face, but many, kings and beggars, lovers and killers, all flowing together in one endless tide. He saw through their eyes, felt their joys, their fears, their small, bright moments of being. He saw the world continuing, but not healed, not at peace. There were new wars, new gods, new greed in men's hearts. The faces changed, but the story remained, and beneath it all, the hunger waited, wearing his form. He whispered to the river, "Then I have done nothing." From the far side of the shore, footsteps sounded. Kalor turned, and out of the mist came a child. A girl this time, slender and dark-haired, with eyes the color of dawn. She wore no cloak, no shoes, and though the air was cold, she did not shiver. In her hands, she carried something small, wrapped in silk. "You've been waiting for me," she said simply. Kaelor studied her. "I have waited for many, though few ever find their way here. I was sent," she said, "by the ones who call themselves the Faceless. They found your story in the ashes of Braavos. They said the god who wears all faces had vanished. They sent me to bring him home." Kaelor's voice was soft, but not unkind. "Do you know who I am, child?" She nodded. "The Whisperer, the Keeper, the one who remembers." He looked away, his gaze upon the dark water. "Then they have remembered too much." The girl took a step closer. From the silk she unwrapped an object, small, round, dull gray, an iron coin marked with 2 faces. Its edges were worn smooth, but its weight was unmistakable. "The last of its kind," she said. "It was found in the hand of a dead man. They said it once belonged to you." Kaelor reached for it, but when his fingers touched the metal, pain flared like fire. He drew back, the river beneath him trembling. The coin fell to the water and floated. From its surface rose faint ripples of light, and with them voices, old voices, Braavosi, Valyrian, Westerosi, all weaving together in a low chant. Kaelor knew the words. It was the prayer of the Faceless men, the first that had ever been spoken. All men must serve. The girl watched, her eyes wide. "What does it mean?" "It means they are calling me," Kaelor said. "And when the dead call, even death must answer." The light spread, rising from the river in shimmering veils. The faces beneath the surface turned upward, their mouths open in silent prayer. The girl fell to her knees as the glow deepened, flooding the cavern with a soft, white radiance. Kaelor stood at its center, the light gathering around him, his shadow dissolving into it. For the first time in uncounted years, he felt warmth. Not from the god, not from the hunger, but from the lives that remembered him. "You see now," the voice of the river said, echoing through every drop. "There is no end, only passing. You were never meant to hold death, only to guide it." Kaelor bowed his head. "Then guide me now." The river answered, not with words, but with song. Its current rose around him, lifting him from the stone, carrying him upward through the darkness, toward a faint glimmer that might once have been the sky. The girl reached out, calling his name, but he only smiled. "Do not fear," he said. "The god is not gone. He walks in every life, in every death. You will find him in the faces of those who come after." The water swallowed him whole, and then was still. The girl waited long, until the last light faded and the cavern fell silent once more. Only the river moved, calm and endless. She knelt beside it and touched the surface. Beneath the water, she saw her reflection, but not her face, another's. Kaelor's eyes gazed back at her, serene, ageless, full of peace. Then they changed again, becoming hers, yet not hers, as if both souls shared the same vessel. A whisper brushed her ear. "All men must serve, all faces return." When she rose, the river glowed faintly beneath her feet. The coin had vanished, but its reflection shimmered on the water, as though the world itself had accepted its weight. She turned and began to walk, her shadow following her up the long path to the surface. When she emerged into the dawn, the first light of the sun broke across the horizon, catching her eyes and turning them silver. Years would pass before the Faceless in Braavos spoke of her. A new voice in the hall, calm and certain, who spoke of balance rather than death. Under her hand, their god was no longer feared, but honored. They said that when she prayed, the river beneath the temple whispered. And on the coldest nights, when fog rolled in from the sea, the acolytes sometimes saw a figure standing at the water's edge, gray-cloaked, motionless, smiling. No one dared speak to him. They only bowed their heads and listened, for in that stillness they heard the world breathing, and through it, the endless voice that remembered them all. The sea mist clung to the stones of Bravos, thick and cold as breath in winter. The temple of the many-faced god loomed above the canal, its twin doors of ebony and bone closed against the dawn. Yet within, beneath the long hall of faces, light flickered softly, the glow of countless candles burning low before the god's pool. The girl who had returned from the east knelt beside it, her reflection wavering upon the water's glassy surface. Her name was Noah, though few spoke it aloud. She was called simply the Keeper now. Years had passed since she had walked the dark river beneath the world, yet its whisper still lingered in her mind. Calm, eternal, patient as stone. All her life since had been a dream of balance. The house had changed beneath her hand. Death was no longer taken as payment alone. It was given as mercy, chosen with reverence. The faceless men learned not merely to kill, but to remember. Each face they took was stored not as a tool, but as a prayer. The god was not vengeance, nor hunger, nor shadow. He was memory. Yet even peace is fragile. That night, as the tides turned and the moon rose above the Titan, Noah felt it, a tremor deep beneath the stone foundations of the house. The candles guttered. The water in the pool rippled, though no wind stirred it. She looked up, and for a heartbeat, every face upon the walls, the 1,000 visages of kings, beggars, lovers, traitors, seemed to turn toward her. Their eyes opened, and in the silence that followed, she heard the whisper, "The circle breaks once more." Noah rose slowly. "Who speaks?" The whisper came again, softer now, more familiar. "The one who remembers." She knew that voice, the voice from her dreams, Kalor's voice. "Where are you?" she whispered. "In the river and beyond it, in the faces you keep. The hunger sleeps, but not forever. It dreams of fire." Her heart quickened. Fire? Yes. The red god's flame grows. It calls to the hunger, promising freedom. The world will burn again, unless the two are joined. Shadow and light, death and life, balance and unmaking. The time has come for the mask to pass anew. Before she could answer, the ripples stilled. The candles righted themselves. The voices fell silent. Noah bowed her head. "Then I will go," she said quietly, as he once did. The next morning, she left Bravos. The city watched her departure in silence, though few understood what they saw. A lone woman cloaked in gray, her eyes bright with silver light, boarding a ship bound for the south. She carried no coin, no blade, only a small vial of black water taken from the god's pool. The voyage was long, and the sea restless. For 7 days the ship sailed beneath a shroud of mist, until at last the fog thinned, and the coast of Dorne rose from the horizon, its cliffs red as blood. Noah disembarked in a small port where the sands met the sea, and there she heard the first whispers of the new fire spreading across the land, the temples of R'hllor rising once more, their priests crying of the coming dawn, their bonfires consuming whole cities in the name of light. She followed their trail inland. The air grew hotter, the nights red with embers. Villages burned and rebuilt, only to burn again. She saw believers marked with the flame's sigil, their eyes hollow with devotion. Everywhere she went, they spoke of a prophet, a man who did not burn. Noah found him at last in the ruins of a fortress, standing before a pyre that blazed even in daylight. He was tall and gaunt, his skin pale from the flame's light, his eyes the color of molten gold. Around him knelt his followers, chanting softly as the fire roared higher. When he turned, the heat seemed to bend away from him. "You've come far, Shadow Walker," he said. His voice was smooth, almost kind. "The god of death sends a messenger to the god of life." Noah met his gaze. "I serve not death, but balance, and you are breaking it." He smiled faintly. "Balance is an illusion of fear. Fire brings truth. It burns away the false." "Fire feeds hunger," she said. "The world must be devoured before it can be reborn." He stepped closer, and the air shimmered between them. "Do you not see? Your God and mine are brothers, two halves of the same whole. One seeks to remember, the other to forget. Join me, and together we will end this cycle of dying." Noah's eyes gleamed like moonlight upon water. "The hunger has many tongues. You are only its newest face." Then she uncorked the vial. Black water spilled onto the sand. Where it touched, the fire faltered, hissing like a beast in pain. The prophet staggered back, his followers crying out. The darkness spread in veins across the ground, devouring the flame, until only embers remained. "You cannot drown the sun," he roared. "No," Noah said, "but I can teach it to sleep." The air cracked, and the two forces met. Flame and shadow, life and death, fire and water. The world vanished into a blinding storm of light. When the storm ended, the fortress was gone. In its place lay a vast crater, smooth and glassy as a mirror. At its center stood Noah, untouched, her cloak drifting like smoke. The prophet was nowhere to be seen. She looked down and saw, at her feet, two objects half buried in the sand, a coin and a mask of black iron, newly forged, its surface shimmering between fire's red and water's silver. She knelt, lifting it. It was light as breath, yet thrummed with power. On its inner surface, words were etched, words in the old Bravosi tongue. "Remember and forget, burn and be still." Noah closed her eyes. For a heartbeat she saw him, Kalor, standing upon the river, smiling, and beyond him, the faces of all who had ever lived, watching, waiting. She lifted the mask to her face. When she returned to Braavos, many years had passed. The house was unchanged, yet every candle flared as she entered. The acolytes fell silent as she walked to the pool and placed the mask upon its surface. It floated there, half light, half dark, casting ripples of silver and crimson across the water. "This is the face of balance," she said. "Shadow and fire, death and life. The god is whole once more." The kindly men, older now, their faces lined with reverence, bowed their heads. "And what of you, Keeper?" one asked. "What face will you wear now?" Noah smiled faintly. "None. My work is done. I will go where he went." They watched as she stepped into the pool. The water rose around her, glowing faintly. Her reflection split, one half dark, one bright. Then she was gone, leaving only ripples, and the faint whisper of her voice echoing through the chamber. "All men must serve. All gods must rest." That night, the sea outside Braavos was calm. The moon rose full and red, mirrored perfectly in the still water. And those who stood upon the docks swore they saw two figures walking upon the surface, a man and a woman, their hands clasped, their faces turned toward the horizon. When the tide came in, they vanished, and the world was quiet again. But somewhere deep beneath the waves, the river Ash stirred once more, its current steady, its song renewed. It carried the faces of all things, fire and shadow, life and death, love and memory, flowing onward, forever in balance, forever remembering. The years rolled onward, and the world, as it always had, forgot. Empires rose, their banners bright beneath new suns, their kings proud upon gilded thrones. The faces of the gods changed again, their names shaped by other tongues, yet the old prayers still whispered in hidden corners where the wind from the sea carried the scent of salt and memory. The house of black and white endured, quiet as the tide, though fewer knew its name. The acolytes who served there spoke seldom, their faces serene as stone. At dusk, they lit their candles and set them afloat upon the still waters of the pool. The flames drifted across the dark surface like stars upon a night sky without moon, and when the last candle sank, the water murmured softly, as if in answer. They said it was the god's breath, the breath of the one who remembered, and sometimes, in that sacred hush, the priests heard the faint sound of footsteps, as though two figures passed unseen between the columns, one with a voice of river water, the other of fire. Then the air would grow still, the candles would burn steady, and peace would return. Beyond Braavos, beyond the known seas, storms gathered. In the east, where the mountains of shadow met the dying edge of the world, black fire burned again. The lands of Ashai, long silent, shuddered as the river ash began to stir. Its waters boiled beneath the moon, glowing faintly red from deep within the earth. Those who lived in the shadowed city spoke in fear of shapes rising from the depths, faces carved in flame, eyes burning like dying stars. And from the western coasts, sailors whispered that the sea itself had begun to whisper back, repeating in many tongues a name long lost to men. Kalor. Some called it a curse, others a promise, but the truth lay somewhere between, as it always had. Far inland, in the ruins of a forgotten fortress, a single figure knelt beside a cracked pool of rainwater. The figure's cloak was pale gray, the fabric worn to threads. Beneath its hood, the face was neither young nor old, neither man nor woman, and perhaps it was both. The water reflected no image. The figure reached into the pool, and the surface trembled, revealing a reflection not of the sky, but of deep, endless water, the river ash flowing beneath the world. Upon it drifted candles, thousands of them, their flames steady and bright. A voice rose from the reflection, familiar, soft, and endless. The world forgets. The world remembers. The balance endures. The figure bowed its head. The fire burns again. It seeks to unmake what was made. The voice answered, "Then the time has come, as it was before, as it will be again." The pool darkened, and from its depths rose a faint glimmer, a mask formed not of iron but of water and flame, shifting, alive. It floated upward, hovering before the figure. Its two halves pulsed with light, one silver, one crimson, and the line between them shimmered like a heartbeat. "The face of balance," whispered the voice. "Take it and walk between." The figure lifted trembling hands and pressed the mask to their face. The world seemed to sigh, a long exhale that reached the furthest corners of creation. When the figure stood, the air around them wavered like heat, and their shadow split upon the stones, one dark, one bright. The new mask-bearer walked westward, through deserts where the wind sang in tongues of dust, through forests grown wild over the bones of old empires, through cities that worshipped gods of coin and fire and gold. They moved unseen. Wherever they went, balance followed. In one kingdom, a tyrant who ruled by blood awoke to find his sword rusted and his hand withered. In another, a healer who had defied the gods to restore life found her heart stilled as her patient breathed again. The scales of fate tipped, not by cruelty, but by necessity. Those who saw the masked traveler spoke of eyes that glowed like embers under water, of a voice that could calm storms or summon silence. To the dying, they were mercy. To the proud, a warning. Some named them the twin-faced one. Others whispered, the last faceless. But in the temples of Braavos, when word reached across the narrow sea, the old priests knew better. They gathered in the Hall of Faces, lighting a single candle for every death that year, and when they came to the last, they did not light it. They let the wick rest cold and dark. The balance walks again, said the eldest priest. May it never rest too long, nor too soon. In the high mountains of the Vale, where snow never melted, the masked one found the prophet of fire reborn. The man was young this time, golden-haired, his eyes bright with zeal. He knelt before a blazing pyre, murmuring to it as if it were a lover. I have seen the dawn, he said, without turning. You come to stop it again. The dawn is not the end, the masked one replied. It is another face of the night. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think you can tame the flame? You are a shadow, clinging to ashes. The masked one stepped forward, the snow hissing where their feet touched. And you are fire burning itself to death. The prophet turned, drawing from his robe a dagger made of living flame. He struck, but the mask split the fire apart. The blade turned to smoke. The air itself seemed to bend as shadow and flame met once more, each striving to swallow the other. When the storm cleared, the prophet was gone. Only the masked one remained, kneeling amid a circle of melted snow. The mask's two halves glowed faintly, neither dimming the other. Above, the first star appeared in the evening sky, neither sun nor moon, but both reflected in miniature. That night, the masked one dreamed. They walked again beside the river Ash, its waters black and endless. Across from them walked two figures, Kalor and Noah, their faces serene. Between them flowed the river, wide as the world. Is it done? The masked one asked. Kalor smiled. It is never done. It only changes hands. Noah extended her palm. In it lay the iron coin, old and smooth, gleaming faintly in the half-light. You have walked well, she said. Now the choice is yours. What choice? To end the circle, or let it turn once more. The masked one looked into the water. Within it, countless faces gazed back, laughing, crying, living. The hunger still moved among them, quiet but never gone. To end the circle would mean silence, stillness forever. But stillness was death beyond death. No memory, no life, no light. They looked at Kalor, who watched them with calm understanding. I remember now, the masked one said. Balance is not peace. It is motion. The world must turn. They placed the coin upon the river's surface. It floated for a moment, then sank, its glow fading into the dark. When they looked up, the river was gone, and the dawn had returned. In Braavos, a wind rose from the sea, carrying with it the sound of distant laughter and the scent of rain. The priests of the House of Black and White gathered by the pool, watching as the water rippled of its own accord. For a moment, two reflections appeared upon its surface, one of fire, one of shadow, before both merged into stillness. The eldest priest smiled. The god breathes, he said softly. The faces remember. Outside, the city stirred, bells rang, ships departed, the world continued, and somewhere, far beyond the horizon, upon a shore where light met darkness, a lone figure stood, cloaked, masked, eternal. The sea whispered at their feet, speaking in the tongues of all who had ever lived. The figure bowed its head. "All men must die," they murmured. "All things must fade." Then they looked toward the rising sun. But memory endures. The tide rolled in, erasing their footprints, carrying their words away to join the endless song of the world.